Hello world. Um, I hope I'm live. This is the first time that I've tried to do a live stream of me actually painting. I do live streams at the end of every month just to keep people informed of what I've been up to for the last month. Um, so I'm sort of in front of the camera for those. But this time I'm going to try and actually do some sort of demonstration while people watch me. Just bear in mind that I'm not used to this, so it might take me a few seconds to notice that questions have popped in. Do ask me questions as I'm going through this. It'll save me talking about what I'm doing all the time, all the way through. So do ask me questions, but it might take me a little time to notice that they've come in, and I'll try to answer any questions as they do come in. Uh, I'm doing something that I haven't done before for this demo. Very brave. Normally people probably would demonstrate stuff that they're really good at and familiar with. But I'm all about transparency on this channel and trying to improve. And sometimes it's good to see that things don't go right. So if it doesn't go right today, that's life. Um, but I was watching on YouTube a man talking about Grisaille, which is sort of doing tonal underpainting and then doing glazes and washes over the top um, of that. So it's sort of the hard work is the underpainting really in terms of getting all the accuracy, and then to colorize it. It's a bit like colorizing a black and white photograph, I suppose, to a certain extent. Um, it should be the quick bits. It should be just a few washes of the right colors, um, and varying those very subtle colors in the glazes afterwards. I'm going to use photo reference of a male model because I've been used to doing a lot of life drawing and stuff recently. Um, so that at least I'm familiar with that part of the process. So that's one less complication probably, and that should go okay. I'm hoping, might not. Who knows? Sunday morning, I might still be asleep. Um, so I'm going to do a sort of figure drawing based on a reference photo that I took of a model a few years ago. Um, and just experimenting with it really. If it's a disaster, it's a disaster. If it works well, it'll be something that I'll try again probably. Um, I was watching the video, as I say, on YouTube of this man doing a gnarled old tree trunk, actually, to be fair. Um, and it just seemed an interesting technique, really. I suppose in the past I've thought of underpaintings as a bit of extra effort, really. You do an underpainting and then you paint over it, really. Um, but with this technique, it seems to be that the underpainting isn't wasted work because, of course, that shines through because you're only putting very thin glazes on the top to get the colour. Using gouache because that's what I've been used to using again recently, so that's another perhaps complication out of the way. So let's get started. You can see that I've taped a piece of aquarelle Daler-Rowney paper, 300-gram paper, onto a board. I've actually measured this to fit a ready-made frame in case it goes brilliantly. I can always frame it and sell it afterwards. But that's not the real intention, really. If you notice, I've put the line in around the edge to fit the frame, but I've taped slightly outside that line so that if there's any variation in size or whatever, it should still not have any white marks around the edge of the mount on the frame. So I'm going to start using a propelling pencil, and I'm just going to draw out the figure. I think with figure drawing, you do, well, certainly with this sort of learning technique, I'm going to need to lay it out so that the figure is fairly accurate. You might not see this in too much detail in that I'm going to try not to press on too hard because I don't really want the lines to show through, and some of this painting will be very thin washes at the end of it. I've got two reference photos. I've grayscaled one for the Grisaille part, so that will help me to see the tones when I'm doing the actual painting using the gouache paints of the sort of tones. And then I've got a colour version of the same photo just so that will help me see the colour washes at the end. Won't be using that until right at the end, I suppose. In terms of how long this is going to take, I don't know. Um, some people might pop on and off throughout, but I would think it'll take an hour and a half, something like that. I'm expecting in total. Don't feel you've got to stay for the whole thing if you don't want to. Okay, so I'm just going to draw out using this pencil roughly where the figure is sitting so that I can get the proportions and the layout correct. Already started in the wrong place. Need to be slightly further over than that. You can see it's a square crop that I've got. Yeah, just start by laying the rough shape out. Come in and do some more detail shortly. There will be quiet periods on this, as I'm not used to doing it really. I'm used to being quiet when I'm drawing or painting. But I will keep trying to glance across to see if there are any questions that have come in or whatever. If you haven't got any, don't mind. Talking while working is something that's becoming a bit more familiar with me in that, I've got a Patreon now and we do demos and things on that from time to time, and social events like drink and draws where we're all talking while drawing and painting. So I'm getting used to that a bit, um, which is a good thing. But it's all a bit new to me, so you just got to bear with me a little bit. I see that I've got one of my patrons on now, so thank you for joining me, Multicrons. They have been a great support to me since I've started all this YouTube thing, my patrons. Looks like from my view that you can see at least the lines that I'm drawing. As I say, I'm drawing them quite faintly, really. You'll see in a minute the actual pose as I get it sort of finalised. Somebody sitting crouched up on a bean bag. I did try to look at a few live demos of drawing going on yesterday, actually, just to see how other people did this sort of thing. If you see what I'm doing there, I'm just lining up with where the armpit is and the front of the face, just so that I can try and get this as accurate as I can. I did sort of enjoy looking at the live streams. Obviously, the historic live streams, there wasn't one going on at the time yesterday when I was looking at them. But it was quite an interesting thing to watch. That angle isn't quite right. So whenever I'm drawing out, I mean, it's not just about the Grisaille technique. This, whenever I'm drawing out, I'm looking at angles, negative shapes. Um, if you can get all the angles of everything correct, then everything should meet up where it should meet up in a way. A bit like triangulation. That's a bit of an oversimplification, simplification because sometimes it doesn't. But essentially, it helps if you can get all the angles correct to start with. You may have made some lines longer than others, but inevitably, if every line is at the right angle, everything should cross where it crosses and stuff on the actual figure or whatever you're drawing. Hoping that the erasing doesn't affect the paper texture when I come to put the washes on, but we'll find that out as we do it. To put very subtle shading on this. Otherwise it will be a pencil drawing Grisaille, so the pencils will be the marks. That actually goes a little bit further down there. Lost touch with this model, so I won't be able to sort of let them know that I finally used the photographs that we took for reference all that time ago, but maybe they'll see it on YouTube. I'm always very touched that people are so willing to pose for me, to be frank. It's a surprising number of people out there that are willing to help, give you material to help your artistic journey. See if I can get this calf in now. Any questions come in? No, not yet. That's fine. Don't even know if anybody's watching me, but I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to carry on. As I say, this is a bit of an experiment, really. I normally, for my channel, if you are new here, I would do sort of demo time lapses. But this is the first time that I've done something live like this. And in essence, it's the same sort of approach. The difference being that with a sort of normal one, I would add the voiceover afterwards. And that's partly because, when you're concentrating, it's a bit difficult to talk at the same time. And you're perhaps realizing that listening to me now. Um, Not easy. You can see that I'm taking my time over this, as in, I think it's important to get, because this is a new technique, to get the accuracy so that I don't have to worry about too much when it comes to actually doing the painting part. Again, just very subtly trying to show the shading here. I'm not doing a pencil drawing after all. And this will be covered with darker gouache paint anyway when I start adding that. Sort of a bulge here. Where the muscles are being constricted. There is a shadow here. Darker. Multicrons has given me advice. Apparently he tried this yesterday. Don't do too much in terms of shading. Learning from experience, which is why the Patreon's so great. We're all learning from each other as we do new and different things. He did it, I think, he was using pastels. Is that correct? Never heard of anybody doing it with pastels before. It's normally a painting technique, because pastels, by their sort of nature, are opaque. So, sort of, how do you get the layers underneath to show through? I suppose is my question there. And I did wonder about that with gouache, in that gouache is quite an opaque medium, or certainly can be. But I've been doing a lot of work with it recently, um, where it's been sort of almost like watercolor work, really. Right, so let's just finish laying everything out as it should be laid out. The bean bag coming around here. Comes around. Actually, the back goes out a little more. Oh, Verdaccio, he says he was using. Okay. Not heard of that one before. Verdaccio. Maybe we should have a demonstration from you, Multicrons, at some point about how that worked for you, as I've not heard of it before. There's a shadow on the back here, so let's put that in. When I take photographs, I try to get interesting shadows in the back to add a bit of interest. I won't put too much of that in, very subtle. I can always sort of erase this a little bit before I start painting. I think we need to sort of add the last details up here. It's quite important to get the head looking right. Would help if you had an ear, for instance. Shadow behind the ear. The light's coming sort of from the left of this photograph. I hate feet, as you can tell. I've left it to last as usual. Oh, to near the end anyway. So as I said at the beginning, I'm using a black and white photo for this to help with this sort of initial part of it. And I'll probably only use the colour photo version right at the end. A bit longer that too. There's a bit of a toe sticking out here, foot coming down here of the far leg. to have disappeared. Up that way, I think. Actually, the beanbag comes out there a bit more. He is quite a lean-bodied model, which is quite nice. So you can see the shapes of the muscles underneath the skin quite well. Actually, a bit of reflected light coming on down here, and that is the darkest area there, the shadow. This is all dark in here, of course. And there are some darker shadows from the other limbs. I seem to be ignoring what you said, Multicrons, and carrying on adding shading. You did tell me, everybody's a witness, if it all goes pear-shaped. Hope it's looking like, well, beginning to look like something to everybody. Do ask any questions if you wish. Such tiny details on this size of drawing to get right. In terms of facial features, quite a difficult exercise. The actual paper itself is only 20 by 20 centimeters, so of course the face is tiny in this image. And I don't need to worry about it too much because, of course, it's when I'm painting that I'll need to tighten this up really, but I do need to something like an accurate beard and moustache this model has. Quite a jutting chin. Means now that I can actually put in the cheek. Just corrected that there. The cheekbone coming along there. Smudging all over the place, but again, it doesn't really matter. Okay. I think I'm getting there for initial layout now. Just referencing and cross-referencing, checking to see if it sort of matches the reference. I've got the reference quite close, so it's not too difficult to see that. Okay, I think that's enough of a drawing out, probably. Maybe I'll just put the sort of some of the details in the background so I know where everything is. That's quite dark there. Shadow there. All sorts of creases going on in the cloth. The model's sitting on a cloth here. As so many of my photographs of models are, my work is getting a bit repetitive really because of I use the same sort of backdrop and everything. So I'm going to look at changing that, get some new reference stuff, reference photos with varied backgrounds, even just plain backgrounds really. Okay, so that's the drawing out done. I don't know how long that's taken me. How long have I been going? 35 minutes, quite a long time for drawing out, but I did want to get it accurate. So I'm using now the gouache paints. I've got a palette here of paints that I've put out already. I've cleaned the actual mixing trays here. Um, I tend to use the gouache paints that I've used before. They dry out, but you can reactivate them by adding a bit of water. Um, so I did that a while ago. Just put a drop of water on each, and that'll allow me to reactivate them. I'm also using some Derwent water-filled uh, brushes here, um, which I find quite useful. It means I use them when I'm out painting as well, because you don't have to carry pots of water around, or so many pots of water. Um, you can just have one pot to wash your brushes really. Now what I could do here, I suppose, and just so that I don't get any of these showing through necessarily, I'm just going to go over the whole of this and erase a little bit of the definition of it, so it might disappear a little bit for you. But I don't want any of these marks. It might seem a bit odd to have added them all, and then to erase them all. But because it's going to be thin washes, I don't really want it to be a pencil drawing grisaille. I want it to be darker paint underneath of a tonal type, the plan. So I quite like that. It's not actually fully erasing, it's smudging that's a bit of the grey all over the page. It's quite a nice effect. All of these things, the reason I'm doing this is you learn so much about lots of things when you try a new technique. I wouldn't normally use watercolor paper to draw on, but I'm sort of quite liking the soft effect of that. I hope it doesn't affect the surface of the paper for the paint, but we'll find that out in a minute. And if it does, I've learned that for the next time. I may have issues towards the end when I want to put the washes on, in that I've got to, of course, let all the dark greys and stuff that I add on um, dry before I can do the washes. There's no point doing a wash over something that's still wet, otherwise you just mix all of the colours together and end up with a bit of a mess, really. So I'm going to mix my darks now. Now, the man that was doing it, he used some sort of black colour, and that was a bit bluey for my liking and I don't want this. I mean, flesh colours shouldn't be too blue, otherwise it looks like the model's freezing. So that's no good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix. Don't know if you want to see this. Most people would have a different camera to show this. I'm going to mix ultramarine and raw umber, I think, and make sort of a warmer dark. And I will build that up gradually. So I will make a very weak wash of this and start adding it up, and then gradually build up by layering this dark that I'm using as well. So quite a thick paint this is. You can see that it would be quite opaque at this sort of thickness. I might even put a touch of red in there to make it a bit more purple, because I'll be dealing with flesh tones here. I just don't want it to be too harsh or blue, because that might shine through as blue with the very thin lighter washes over the top. So that's the paint colours mixed. And now I'm going to do a really, really wet version of that. So just put more water in it basically, so that I can start by putting in the very dark shadows, but then I'll go over them again and again to build them up. So for a start, You can see how thin that is to start. Start by putting in the shadow at the back. Maybe a bit of a weird place to start. But this, of course, will dry lighter as well. So remember that with gouache. So it probably will be hardly visible, especially as I build up the darker tones. Start with the predominantly shadowed back as well. Be a bit careful down the bottom here because when I build up the shadows, that is dark, but there is reflected light down there as well. I don't know if this is coming across okay on the camera or not, but the man that I was watching on YouTube the other day was very keen to say, just as you've done multicrons today, you do need to leave the highlights in a way, in that the color of the overpainting glazes won't show up very well through the darker bits that you add. You'll end up with a very dull painting if you don't do that. Sort of quite liking it so far. Early days yet, plenty of time to ruin it. Ah, Karen is on from Malaysia. This is the furthest flung maybe that I've ever had. I don't I don't really know where people watch me from, to be honest. I have to say, Karen, it can't be a very entertaining holiday if you're spending it watching me. But bless you for joining. So you can see that already as I go over the very pale washes that I've put on already, they do darken up quite a lot. It's a matter of controlling that, I suppose. Ah, it's drizzling in Malaysia, apparently. And slowly but surely, we are beginning to get some definition here. Now I should start trying to build up the tone a little, I think, because that's very subtle. everywhere. So a little bit more paint added. And go over it all again. Certainly the darker bits anyway. I won't necessarily be going over everything again. Have I said any words for a long time? Probably not. I've entered concentration phase at that point, I think. Sort of doing dry brush sort of technique here as well now. I think that's probably as dark as I want to go everywhere. Well, on most places, because I don't want it to be that the sort of fleshy colours that I'm going to put on it don't show up at all. To make this quite dark down here, the back of the other leg. More speaking. Sorry, you probably asked for more speaking about an hour and a half ago. Um, sorry, David. Very demanding, these people watching me, asking me to concentrate on painting and talk at the same time. Blimey. Beginning to get to that ugly stage, I think, where I'm not exactly thinking it's going very well. Question is, can I keep going? Singing? Blimey. I don't want people to be totally put off from joining me. Deafened for life. Hmm. Well, I'm not sure about that, to be honest. We have a tonal painting, but I'm not sure how successful it will be adding the stuff on the top because it's not really very dark. The darks aren't very dark, but we can have a try. Multicron's asking me if need a drink. It's gouache paint, Karen. Opaque watercolor basically, but I'm using it very watercolory, so very thinly. Now, I think for this experiment, I will now try and add some colour to this. Trying to remember the bits that I did most recently so that they actually end up dry. And of course, with it being watercolourish, this paint, it's actually quite dark in there. With it being watercolourish, I'm hoping that I can put some washes on that don't reactivate these layers below. I don't really want them to blend. I want them to glaze over the top. That's the point of this. Whether I can be successful at that or not, I don't know. Try and take some colour out of there. Tissue, I need tissue. Get that sort of reflected light that's going on down there. There's probably a little bit. Light that could be taken out here as well. Sort of a bulge that comes there. Right. I keep saying right and then carrying on a bit more. I want this to be a little dulled. It's just putting some. I don't want it to be pure white. It won't be pure white, of course, when I start adding a bit of colour because every colour has some tone, but it's not white. So let's just blend it down a little. Turn it down a little. Certainly would be a more gradual transition from this side as well. Probably should do a little bit more on the foot. I'm glad you're keeping each other entertained while I'm concentrating. Don't tell everybody my secrets, multi-grand. Feet are my Achilles heel. They are. I don't like feet. Right then, before I pale all of this down, I'm going to, or dull all of it down, should I say. I'm going to see what adding washes does to this stage. If it's a disaster, it's a disaster. I see that the camera's moved again, or something's moved. I don't know. Been twisting around. So I'm just going to try this by just. I need to probably change to the coloured version of the photograph now, just to start looking at the colours that I've got. I'm going to mix a flesh tone. And once I've sort of covered the body, don't know how opaque this flesh tone will be. I'm hoping that stuff will still show through, and I can add subtle changes in colour. So, like the bottom feet tend to be redder than other parts of the body. The head tends to be more red. So I'm just going to add very subtle coloured washes, and hopefully that will sort of make the figure look like a figure with these purples, these darker colours showing through. That's the plan. Whether the plan works is another matter. But that's what experimentation's about. And then we would call it a day as an experiment, I think. I wonder if it's dry. Not yet. Not that it needs to be perfectly dry. I don't think it will reactivate. So I have my photo color reference now. And what I can do is start adding washes, I hope, and hopefully it won't reactivate too much. Going over the shadowed area as well, otherwise it would look very different. So you can see that this part of the process is the easy bit really, in that you're just bringing everything, like colorizing an old photo, as I said before. The fact that it's slightly opaque is working with those shadows at the back, it's making them more subtle. You actually can't see the color very well on the screen just glancing across at it. So I need to be a bit braver in terms of putting that color on, I think, because it's a bit too subtle at the moment. I quite like the effect of that already. Who knew that it might work out? Not I. And now I can build up the color as well, gradually. Let's try some more red. That's a bit red. On the head. Yeah. Red. Feet. Hmm. I'm actually half happy with how the figure is beginning to colorize. That's interesting. Hmm, maybe some purpley blues. Yeah, the colour on the camera isn't coming out very bright at all, but actually it's quite technicolor at this point. I'll have to take a photograph of it afterwards. They're white, David, the cushions, which is why I'm putting some bluer shadows in certain places. As usual when I'm working, I'm getting a bit bored. Multicrunt needs to tell me off. Waterfill brushes, yeah. How long have we been going? 1 hour 38. Not allowed to be bored, apparently. Well, alas, I am beginning to get bored. That's not very good news. And I'm sure everybody's getting bored watching me. Bless you all. Just sort of trying to indicate the material here. I'm not going to have ever try and accurately represent it. I think I am done as much as I want to do, to be honest, on this. It's been an interesting experiment, and I think overall it worked quite well. Bit worried about it at one point. No, you can't see the reference photo because it's a private photo that somebody posed for, and I said to them that I wouldn't show it to anybody, so that would be not fair on them, even though, I don't. And also, I don't agree with sort of showing the reference photo in a way, in that a lot of people judge art by whether it actually looks like the reference or not, and not whether it's an interesting painting or not. Um, so I'm not really. I don't. That's deliberately why I don't put reference photos up when I do painting demo videos and stuff as well. It's really irrelevant to me what the inspiration was for the painting. It's whether it um, stands up as a piece of painting, really. Um, so no, I'm not going to show the reference because of those reasons. But it's not too accurate in terms of the likeness. But does it look like a human being? Probably, just about. I'll try and take a photo of the actual finished. Did I paint it too accurately? It's accurate-ish. Don't know what you mean by that, really. Um, it looks a bit like the original model. Probably the jaw could jut a bit more. But as I said, it's about whether it's a painting that gives you an atmosphere and a impression of what it's supposed to be for me, really. And it does that. I think a lot of people get hung up when they're painting about whether their work looks exactly like the reference that they've used or whatever. And actually, that's really unhelpful because just because it doesn't look like the reference, I mean, this does fairly look like the reference, but just because it doesn't look like the reference, that can put people off because they think, oh, I can't get an accurate likeness and I can't, it's not very good compared to the photo. But I'm not trying to create a photograph. I've got the photo already. I took the photograph when the model posed for me. Um, so now I'm trying to create some other type of image from that work that I already have. And to be honest, it used to put me off because I used to get really despondent when I couldn't get an accurate likeness or whatever. And I used to think, oh, I can't paint because I can't create a photograph. Well, why would you be creating a photograph when you're doing a painting? You wouldn't, is the answer. So therefore, Does it work as a painting? To me, it does. And yes, I know people possibly want to see if it's exactly like the photograph that I've copied, but that isn't what it's about for me at all. And I can't from a privacy point of view anyway. I was going to do a video. I don't know if you saw the landscape that I did of the sort of medieval building. I was going to do a video of that because, of course, there's no issues with privacy on a photograph like that. And I was going to show the issues with the perspective that were on it. And I might still do that at some point because perspective is something that people do struggle with, and I struggled with, and I knew there was something wrong with the perspective, but I couldn't quite work out what it was. So I was going to do sort of an overlay of the original photograph and semi-transparent to show where my lines from perspective lines were out, because that you can learn stuff from that. But actually, I'm quite pleased with how this has turned out, um, and it works as a painting, I think. Um, for an hour and 50 minutes now I've been going. Yeah, quite pleased with it overall. Not perfect, obviously. It was never going to be perfect, in that I've never done this sort of technique before. But I think it's something that I'll return to. Just sort of make it quite easy, in that I'm quite used to doing pencil drawings, which are tonal. So why not do paintings that are tonal? I'm sort of quite familiar with that, and then just sort of colorize them like this, and it seems to work quite well. So maybe I'll have another go. It's also difficult doing this when you're being watched, of course. That isn't a criticism of you lot. I'm glad that you are watching me. Thank you. Um, but of course, when you are being watched, it makes your work more scary. Not scary, but you're conscious of being watched, I suppose, and that is off-putting. And this is the first time I've done a painting demo live to everybody. I've done it on the Patreon. Um, but anybody could have come and joined. I don't know how many people did join. I think I had 4 or 5 at one point, but who knows? That's not the point, really. I was just trying to do something different, um, and grow a little, really. I'm going to sign it now. There we go. Must be finished. Okay. Well, thank you very much for watching, and especially as you are watching from home. I will try and take a photograph, and obviously I'll put it on Facebook. Probably you can't really put it onto YouTube, but I'll put it on Facebook, and I think you'll see the photograph is much more colourful than the view you're getting through the camera. I don't know why that is. It's quite dull through the camera, but it's a lot more vibrant in terms of blues and oranges and reds um, on the actual painting itself. So I hope that the photograph picks that up. Thank you for watching, Karen and David from On Holiday. Thanks for the support, and thank you, Multicrons, as ever, for supporting me in everything that I do. Very kind of you. And I'll hopefully do another one of these at some point in the future. Okay, bye.